North Korea launches about 10 missiles toward sea. Trump eyes meeting with Kim. 2 headlines, appearing almost at the same moment. One about missiles rising into the sky over the Korean peninsula. The other about a possible conversation between 2 leaders who once shook the global political order. 10 missiles launched toward the sea, not toward cities, not toward military bases, but toward open water, which raises a quiet but important question. If this was not an attack, then what exactly was the message? Because in international politics, missiles are rarely just weapons. Sometimes they are signals. Signals watched carefully in Washington. Signals studied in Beijing. Signals that financial markets quietly analyze long before governments explain them. And then, almost at the same moment, another development appears. Donald Trump signals that he may be open to meeting Kim Jong-un again, missiles first, diplomacy second. This sequence has appeared before, but this time the global economy is more fragile than it was years ago. Supply chains stretch across continents. Technology production depends heavily on stability in East Asia, which means these 10 missiles might not be about war at all. They might be about leverage. And the real question is not why North Korea launched them. The real question is what happens next. Before we continue, welcome to Warfront Global. If you're someone who likes to understand the deeper forces shaping global power and economics, consider subscribing to the channel. Think of it as a quiet conversation, like advice shared with someone experienced who values understanding the world before making decisions. And while you're watching, tell us something in the comments. Where are you watching this video from today? Because this story begins on the Korean peninsula, but its consequences may reach markets, businesses, and economies across the entire world. In the early hours of the morning, radar systems across Northeast Asia detected something unusual. Military monitoring stations in South Korea and Japan began tracking multiple launch signatures from North Korea's eastern coastline. Within minutes, defense analysts confirmed what was happening. Approximately 10 missiles had been fired. The missiles traveled toward the sea east of the Korean peninsula before eventually falling into open water. At first glance, the event appeared familiar. North Korea has conducted missile tests many times in the past, but experienced geopolitical analysts noticed something important almost immediately: the timing. Missile launches rarely occur in isolation. In modern geopolitics, timing often carries more meaning than the weapons themselves. Within hours of the launch reports, another development began circulating through diplomatic circles. Donald Trump had indicated that he might be open to meeting Kim Jong-un again. To casual observers, the 2 events might seem unrelated. But to analysts who study North Korean strategy, the connection is difficult to ignore. For decades, North Korea has used a recognizable diplomatic pattern. First comes escalation, then comes negotiation. Missile launches demonstrate capability. They remind neighboring countries and global powers that North Korea still possesses tools capable of influencing regional security. Only after that signal is delivered do diplomatic conversations sometimes begin. This strategy has appeared repeatedly in modern history. Military demonstrations create leverage. Leverage creates negotiation power. For global markets and business leaders, these signals carry deeper meaning. The Korean peninsula sits at the center of one of the most important industrial regions in the world. South Korea produces a large share of global semiconductor memory. Japan supplies advanced materials and manufacturing equipment. China, located nearby, remains the world's largest manufacturing hub. Together, these economies form a production network that supports industries across the globe. Even a small increase in geopolitical tension in this region can influence shipping routes, insurance costs, and currency markets. That is why missile launches, even when directed into the sea, capture the attention of economic analysts. They are not just military events. They are signals about stability. 10 missiles, fired carefully toward open water, enough to attract global attention, but not enough to trigger immediate confrontation. And when such signals appear at the same moment that diplomatic interest begins to surface, the world begins asking a much larger question. Are these missiles a warning, or the opening move of another negotiation? For many observers, missile launches from North Korea appear unpredictable, sudden actions carried out by an isolated government. But when analysts examine the history of the Korean peninsula carefully, a different pattern begins to appear. The launches are rarely random. They often follow a strategic sequence that has repeated itself for decades. First comes a visible demonstration of power. Missiles are launched, military exercises are conducted, statements are issued through state media. The purpose of this phase is simple: remind the world that North Korea still possesses tools capable of shaping regional stability. Only after that signal has been delivered does the second phase begin: diplomacy. To understand this pattern, it helps to look back at the events of the late 2010s. During that time, tensions between the United States and North Korea reached one of their highest levels in decades. Missile tests became more frequent. Nuclear capabilities were openly discussed. Yet, only a short time later, something unexpected happened. Diplomatic talks began. In 2018, the world watched as Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un met face-to-face in Singapore. It was the first meeting between a sitting U.S. president and a North Korean leader. For a moment, the political atmosphere surrounding the Korean peninsula changed dramatically. Instead of threats and military demonstrations, the conversation shifted toward negotiations, security guarantees, and economic possibilities. Although later talks stalled, the diplomatic moment revealed something important about North Korea's strategic approach. The country often uses tension as a way to open negotiations. In other words, the missile tests are not always preparation for war. Sometimes they are preparation for dialogue. This strategy can appear counterintuitive to outside observers. Why would a country escalate tensions if it wants to talk? The answer lies in leverage. Negotiations between countries are rarely based on goodwill alone. They are shaped by perceived strength. By demonstrating missile capability, North Korea signals that it remains a serious strategic actor. It is a way of ensuring that any negotiation takes place from a position of relevance. For the leadership in Pyongyang, being ignored internationally may be more dangerous than confrontation. Missile launches prevent that invisibility. They force the world to pay attention. At the same time, these demonstrations are often carefully calibrated. Most launches are directed toward the sea, rather than populated areas. They are designed to avoid immediate military retaliation while still delivering a political message. This balancing act requires careful calculation. Too little escalation, and the message might be ignored. Too much escalation, and the risk of military confrontation increases dramatically. For global markets, this pattern creates a familiar cycle. Each launch generates headlines and raises concerns about regional stability. But experienced investors often look beyond the headlines. They ask a different question. What is the strategic objective behind the launch? If the goal is negotiation, markets tend to stabilize after the initial shock. If the goal is confrontation, financial reactions become far more severe. At the moment, the signals appear mixed. On one side, North Korea has demonstrated missile capability once again. On the other side, Donald Trump has signaled openness to meeting Kim Jong-un. To geopolitical analysts, this combination suggests something familiar. Pressure followed by diplomacy. A strategic dance that has played out before on the Korean peninsula. But this time, the global environment is different. The world economy is more interconnected than it was even a decade ago. Supply chains stretch across multiple continents. Semiconductor manufacturing depends heavily on East Asian stability. Shipping routes across the Pacific carry enormous volumes of global trade, which means the stakes surrounding the Korean peninsula are no longer purely regional. They are global. For business leaders, entrepreneurs, and investors watching carefully, the real question is not simply whether missiles were launched. The deeper question is whether those missiles were meant to begin a negotiation. And if history is any guide, that possibility cannot be ignored. The economic chessboard behind the headlines. When most people hear about missile launches from North Korea, they immediately think about military tension. But for experienced business leaders and global investors, the first reaction is often different. They look at the map, because the Korean peninsula sits at the center of one of the most economically important regions on Earth. Within a relatively small geographic space, three major industrial powers operate side by side: South Korea, Japan, and China. Together, they form a manufacturing network that produces a massive share of the world's electronics, automobiles, advanced machinery, and semiconductor technology. This region is not just important for Asia. It is critical for the entire global economy. South Korea alone produces a significant portion of the world's advanced memory chips. Companies based there supply components used in smartphones, computers, artificial intelligence systems, and cloud infrastructure. Japan contributes key materials and precision manufacturing equipment used in semiconductor production. China, meanwhile, remains the world's largest manufacturing hub, assembling products that are shipped to markets across every continent. Because of this economic concentration, even small geopolitical tensions around the Korean peninsula can create ripple effects across global markets. Shipping companies begin monitoring potential disruptions to trade routes. Insurance providers review political risk assessments. Financial markets start adjusting currency expectations. Historically, one of the first indicators of rising tension in the region appears in the foreign exchange market. The Japanese yen often strengthens during moments of geopolitical uncertainty. Investors sometimes treat it as a temporary safe haven currency when tensions rise in East Asia. At the same time, technology companies and global manufacturers begin paying close attention to the stability of semiconductor supply chains. Modern industries depend heavily on microchips. Automobile manufacturers need them. Smartphone producers rely on them. Even household appliances now require advanced electronic components. If instability threatens semiconductor production or shipping routes, the effects can spread quickly across global industries. This is why missile launches, even when directed harmlessly into the sea, still capture the attention of economic analysts. They are signals. signals about the level of stability in a region that sits at the heart of modern industrial production. But there is another dimension to this story that business leaders often understand better than politicians. Geopolitics is not just about conflict. It is also about negotiation. If diplomatic channels reopen between Washington and Pyongyang, the economic implications could extend beyond security policy. Sanctions regimes could be reconsidered. Regional investment expectations might shift. Infrastructure development projects in Northeast Asia could once again become topics of discussion. None of these changes would happen overnight, but even the possibility of diplomatic movement can influence how long-term investors think about the region. For entrepreneurs and business strategists, this moment offers an important lesson. In the modern world, geopolitical awareness is no longer optional. It is a core part of economic decision-making. The launches themselves may last only a few minutes, but the signals they send can influence markets, investment strategies, and global supply chains for months or even years. And that is why events on the Korean Peninsula continue to command such close attention. Not simply because missiles were launched, but because of what those launches might mean for the future direction of global economic stability. What happens next? 3 strategic paths. When missiles are launched and diplomatic signals begin to appear at the same time, experienced analysts rarely focus only on the event itself. Instead, they begin thinking about possible outcomes. Geopolitical events rarely move in a straight line. They tend to unfold through several possible paths, each shaped by decisions made quietly behind closed doors. In the case of the Korean Peninsula, 3 realistic strategic scenarios now sit in front of policymakers, investors, and business leaders. The first possibility is a controlled diplomatic reopening. In this scenario, the missile launches function primarily as a signal, an opening move designed to bring attention back to negotiations. Communication channels between Washington and Pyongyang begin to reopen. Public statements soften slightly. Diplomatic meetings are quietly arranged through intermediaries. If such a process unfolds, the world may once again see discussions around security guarantees, sanctions relief, and economic cooperation. For markets, this scenario tends to produce stability. Investors begin to price and reduce geopolitical risk. Regional trade flows remain steady. Technology supply chains continue operating without disruption. The second possibility is a prolonged strategic stalemate. In this outcome, missile launches continue periodically, but diplomacy fails to gain real momentum. Both sides maintain pressure without crossing the line into direct confrontation. This situation has occurred many times before in the region. Missile tests generate headlines. Governments issue formal condemnations. Military exercises increase slightly, but the underlying strategic balance remains unchanged. For global markets, this environment creates a kind of uneasy normal. Companies continue operating in the region, but risk calculations remain elevated. Insurance premiums for certain shipping routes stay slightly higher. Investors build geopolitical uncertainty into long-term planning. The third possibility is the one policymakers always try hardest to avoid: escalation. This scenario would involve repeated missile tests, stronger military responses from neighboring countries, and a rapid increase in regional tension. Japan and South Korea could expand missile defense exercises. The United States could increase its military presence in the region. Political rhetoric would become sharper. While such developments would not automatically lead to conflict, they would significantly raise uncertainty across Northeast Asia. And uncertainty is something markets rarely welcome. But there is another factor that will shape which of these paths becomes reality: China. China remains North Korea's most important economic partner, and its largest source of trade and energy support. Beijing has historically played a quiet but influential role in maintaining stability on the Korean Peninsula. If tensions rise too quickly, China often steps in diplomatically, encouraging restraint from both sides. This balancing role reflects China's own strategic interests. A stable Korean peninsula reduces the risk of military conflict near Chinese borders and protects important regional trade routes. Because of this, China's diplomatic posture will likely influence the direction of events in the months ahead. For entrepreneurs, investors, and business leaders watching from outside the region, the lesson is clear: geopolitical signals matter. Missile launches are rarely just about military technology. They are part of a broader strategic conversation between governments, and those conversations often shape economic conditions long before official policy announcements appear. The 10 missiles launched toward the sea may not change the world overnight, but they have already reminded markets of something important. Global stability depends not only on economics, but also on the delicate balance of power, diplomacy, and strategic signaling between nations.